Hi, I'm Joe Scacciaferro, and this is On Location. Okay, so we've covered part one with Frank Scacciaferro. Now Frank's back again. Welcome, Frank.
Hello.
And in part two, well, what an exciting welcome. Hello. So,
I didn't know if I was actually supposed to answer, or if it was like a rhetorical introduction.
okay, so in part two, as I said, we're going to go over more of not so much the individual events like we did in part one, but the career, because Frank came into the industry at like 10, 11 years old, because he's obviously part of the family. And then by 17, as I said earlier, he's shot before, he's done lighting before, but at age 17, he actually was on the field of a Super Bowl shooting number two camera. So that's a big deal. But from that point on, the onus was on him to build his career. Yeah, he had the last name, and the last name is like a key to a door. It's not even a door. It just unlocks the door that you could go in. But sometimes that's actually a problem because you have a legacy that you have to live up to, or expectations that you have to live up to. And again, working on my crew, it actually becomes harder because everybody has that. If they don't know Frank, they have that impression that, oh, he's here because he's the son, which has never, ever, ever, ever been the case. And his career, as he's moved it out, has proven that. You know, he's gone out on his own. He's learned a whole bunch of stuff that did not come from me. It's technologies and opportunities that I've learned from him. Frank, let's talk a little bit from your point of view, how you saw your career evolving and then how you progressed, learning new skills, building your own network. And I don't want to start leading the conversation, but kind of talk about how you evolved that for people who want to try to do a similar thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll go like the get in part. Obviously, you kind of mentioned like, yes, I had that opportunity of if I wanted
Right.
to be in it. Like I could have came when I was that age and just be like, yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do this. Or or years down the road decided I want to do something else. I mean, I was young. I just kind of like did it because like you were doing it, and then it was started being a part of the crew, and everyone kind of took me under the wing, and I was learning stuff, I guess, at that age and paying attention to stuff that like I didn't realize that I was learning. Really, I was just like excited to like be a part of it. But yeah, and then moving into past that, like I just started because of some of those people that I met on that crew, saw that I had an interest in stuff and was like actually passionate, I guess, and asking questions and wanting to kind of learn more beyond, being in either the Giant studio or doing football, and just had an interest in, to keep learning whatever else was out there because I didn't even really know what else was out there. I thought I knew, a lot, as anybody at that age would think, like, oh, well, yeah, I worked this, I've done that. And like, not that I was cocky, but it's just like, anybody else that you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, so you have to keep asking questions and find out. There's other stuff that's happening out there, but you want to know how it happens. And then, and then you hear stories from other people that are either working in that, or if, you're with someone and they've run into another person on, if you're out to lunch somewhere or whatever, and they start talking about something, you're like, oh, like what was that you were talking about? What camera system? What are robos? Like, what are, what is this? So like, that's kind of how I kept evolving. And like, I would say the first big jump was Rick, who we've talked about a lot, who came, was originally part of the Giants crew and worked there, but also was like working at MSG, and he did a lot like boxing, like handheld for boxing all these years. So there was and I kept kind of pushing him a little bit, saying that, I wanted to like learn some other stuff, and he saw that and asked me to come down if I was available, and I wanted to come down to Atlantic City when there was a fight. I mean, that's local, but it's not like local. It's still like 2.5 hours away from here. And he was like, I can't get, you're not gonna get like paid, but like if you want to come down and like kind of help see how the build is, and you can help us build cameras and whatever. And I was like, yeah. So I drove down there, was helping him, and then this other guy, Todd Palladino, build all like the cameras for HBO Boxing down there. And then this was a big day, because this is when Rick introduced me to a lot of other people on the crew there, and introduced me to Chuck. But that was the first time I ever met Chuck.
Okay, so all these people have last names, right? So it's Rick Scacciaferro.
Yeah.
You're talking like it's Madonna or Cher. Okay, so
Chuck doesn't need to have a last name.
He actually doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was, because I was like operating jib in like the Giants studio. So I was operating on all these shows, but I had never built a jib before. I didn't even know that was like a thing, right? So like that you had to build them. Like they were just built in the studio. So I never had to even really think about that. And then down there, I met him and started talking to him, and he's just like the nicest guy ever. So he's asking me a bunch of questions, and like, I guess you had already known him
right
as well.
Yeah.
So he, like you said, recognized the last name. Plus I'm coming in through Rick Cipher, and like, he sees me, like how I interacted with him. And then he's just asking me a bunch of questions, like what I do, what I want to do, and all that. And I was telling him that I operate jib. So he's like letting me basically swing the jib that I already was. This is on a set day, so there's no show going on yet. The fight was the next night. Yeah, so I'm kind of showing him that I can operate. And then after that, I got his information from there. And he was like, if you have any interest in coming out and like being a jib utility, like a tech, you can come out on jobs with me. He like, always brings like an assistant or like a tech that helps build. So I started doing that with him, like outside after that show. He started contacting me for other jobs, like go do like parades with him or other fights and like stuff like that.
Wait. Parades.
I think the parade was the first thing I did.
But talk about what parade?
I think it was the Puerto Rican Day Parade.
Okay, these are New York City parades. These aren't like Mayberry RFD parade. These are like real parades. These are New York City big time parades.
Yeah. It was like St. Patrick's. It was either St. Patrick's. I think it was actually St.
Columbus Day, St. Patrick's Day. The bigger
one of those. Right. And like those were cool because they're so long. Like it's a parade. We're at like towards the end of it. Like that's where our arm is built. So he's operating for the whole time. But like I told, like he knew that I had already operated before, but I've operated in a studio on like a 6-foot jib. Much different. These that we're building are like anywhere from like 18 to like 30 feet for the most part. But it's the same idea. It's the same controls. It's just like it's a lot more to pay attention to, obviously.
Yeah, driving a car is driving a car, but driving an Indy car is a very different car.
Yeah, exactly. But the parades, they're so long, and he'd be like, I got to run to the bathroom. Just like take over. And I'll be like, oh, okay. And then and then I noticed that I was on it for like a half an hour, and then like he was just kind of hanging out talking to somebody afterwards, and was like let me operate because I guess I was doing all right. So then like doing that with him for like a year and a half, like going out and helping build and learning how to build and learning how to pack all of his stuff correctly, because he had like multiple, he had like 6-7 different jib kits that like he had other operators that would go out to different jobs. So then I eventually became one of those people on his list of going out by myself with his gear, and then I would hire my own tech to go out and do shows, which was very cool. And in a similar situation, probably around the same time, again, Cypher asked me if I had any interest in doing, because he knew I did jib, so it was kind of like a not like similar, but some still a joystick operated thing was getting into doing robotic camera for, that's what he did at the Garden for hockey and basketball for the Knicks and the Rangers. So again, like I don't even know if I had an MSG ID yet. I don't know if I was working in the studio or not.
I could tell you
But
you
anyway,
didn't. No.
yeah, I didn't think I did. But so he got me in there. He was like, just come to a game. Like come like the setup of a game, not like come watch a Ranger game. So I went in with him one day, and it was like I helped him build the robos, like the same way that I was just learning. That's a little more intricate, right? And so I'm learning how to build that. I think I did it for a Knick game and a Ranger game, 2 separate times. And again, like I'm going in like I'm not. It wasn't even like a thought in my head about getting paid. Like I didn't ask him any of that. Like I didn't. Like I didn't ask to get paid. I wasn't expecting to. I wanted to go learn, basically. So then, because that's how you would build your skills, right? And how you would gain that knowledge of that particular system, like the same way that I did with the jib. And then that's how you start diversifying what you can do and how you can sell yourself, and then eventually make money at it if you're good and you keep learning. So I was doing that, and a similar situation happened where like once we were built and everything was up, he was letting me operate like during warm-ups when like we're not on the air yet, but like the team is out. So I'm just like kind of trying to follow one person, getting the hang of like the actual joystick and like just operating that. And next thing I know, I was doing it during the intermission. Next thing I know, the period started, and I was just kind of operating for a little while. Because he was just like, all right, like I can see that you're getting it. And until like, I guess I kind of like started looking around, like then he hopped back in. It probably wasn't that long of a time, but for me, it was. So that was, and then after doing that a couple times with him, going back, really learning the build and all that, then I eventually got me into MSG, like officially with an ID. And then they knew that I can do studio stuff, and then was learning robo stuff, like doing jib in their studio. So I was kind of made a local home there, of doing a lot with them, and then still doing a lot of the Giant stuff at the time in that studio and shooting games and all that.
Let me just qualify that, because
yeah.
everybody says Giants, and there's a bridge here that doesn't happen. So Ferro Productions at that point was the support arm of New York Giants television. So the Giants hired Ferro Productions for that entire season to do all their broadcast programming. So there's a lot of stuff. The Giants also had built a broadcast studio on their facility that we used to do that. So like Cypher and all these people that we're talking about, Chuck, they all came in, they were hired by Ferro Productions, and it was a Ferro Productions production for the New York Giants broadcast stuff. So it wasn't, and I just don't want people to get confused that the Giants at that time were hiring broadcast people. That they had hired a production house, which was Ferro Productions, which is why all of us got tied together. And we all started doing all of those kinds of things from training camp to a Super Bowl. So I
get.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally, that makes sense. Cause I almost was like, obviously I'm talking to you. So it's like, I'm not like mentioning all of that, like doing all that. I mean, that's, also just where I learned the mentality of how to work, really. And that's where I was groomed, was through Ferro Productions. Not even just you, but all the people that came with that and were associated with that, which is, like you said, was Rick, was obviously from the top down, was you, and then learning from other people that were already in the industry outside of there. But then learning that whole mentality of how to not only, learn from the people that are around you, and see which, I just happen to go into the camera part, but there's other people that would go into, audio, or had a more of a liking to lighting, and would attach to different people on your crew.
Right.
And then you kind of see what you like, or, do all of them, and then kind of figure out which area you really enjoy, or you hate it and don't want to do it at all, and then you go sell insurance, which, like, that happens as well. But yeah, so having that opportunity to work with Faro and meet all those people, that's really was the launching point to meet those people and then move outside of that.
Right.
And then keep learning and keep building.
And one of the unique things that Faro Productions had always done, because it evolved from the music side, and the music world is very different, the way we approach shows, is in music, everybody does everything. So you have to have a cross section of skills, and you have to learn a lot of different things, because we're very small crews doing very big shows. When I moved into television with Faro Productions, that mentality existed. So all the freelancers and the crew that I was hiring before Frank and continuing through Frank we all did everything. So like Rick Cipher knew how to do lighting. George Cuchillo knew how to do camera. All of us had a respect for and learned the other skill sets, which is something that you were indoctrinated in, didn't realize that was unique.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because that's what I came from, and then going to these other places, it's like, oh yeah, no, nobody else works like this. And it's also like the because once the more I evolved in that setting, and like some of those people went to go do other things, I obviously became more of a lead of our crew, at least,
right.
Yes. under your direction, but like a lead of the rest of our crew, and like bringing other people in, like me bringing people in that I knew that had an interest, or were somewhat in the industry, or not at all, but just had an interest in it, and then using what I knew to give that back to them the same way that I got it from everybody else. So there was that there's that cycle that kept happening. And I mean, obviously it's not an accident, and that's the way that you just mentioned, like that's how you built it anyway, was, and now those people that I brought in
are training the next generation.
Correctly, or training the next generation, and then they go on to do other stuff. But it's still that, but because we all were kind of groomed that way, the ones that were like homegrown and not like coming in doing one-off stuff, like that's just now you're like in your career DNA, like it's just, and it's hard for me to go somewhere else and not do that.
Right. Yeah, me too. It's real hard. It's real hard to keep my mouth shut but I'm
also still, and then moving to these different things. Like, we're talking earlier in the first part of this, like talking about the Thursday Night Football or the Agito Camp, like these things, like I still get to a point where I'm still learning different things. And I mean, I hope that never stops, because like I don't want to get bored with anything, so I want to keep moving to whatever else is out there. Plus, it's just fun learning new.
Yeah, and I can give you a rationale why it won't, because technology doesn't change. Technology doesn't stop. So as long as tech keeps growing, you're going to have to learn new skills. Because if you go back to Rick Cipher's early career, and I'm using Rick only because we've dropped the name a bunch, but any camera operator back in those days wouldn't have ever thought that you could operate a camera remotely.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made sense. It would be, well, first, why would you? And second, what are you even talking to? Because the technology didn't exist. It wasn't even on the radar. But once that happened, smart people adjusted and saw the future and moved forward with that. So you have to learn new skills, and you have to be on the front edge of technology. And if you go listen to the piece that we just did, the deep dive into your Oregon 4 weeks out there's a whole bunch of tech, like crazy new tech. You mentioned it in part one, some of the tech that you're doing, all the robotic stuff. It's not just a camera on a pedestal and you're moving joysticks. These things are now on cars, they're in planes, they're doing everything all over the place. And it will come very quickly where there won't be operators behind cameras. It's just not necessary.
Yeah.
and it'll keep going. So what you just said is you don't want to stop learning because you're an enthusiast about that, but you almost can't if you want to sustain a career.
Yeah. If you want to, and you kind of have to almost stay ahead of it
Yeah.
to, yeah, like, cause, and even be thinking yourself about how you can change stuff. I mean, cause I, have access to a lot of people that are the engineers of this stuff. So I mean that whole trace system for like the U.S. Open, like I talk with Mike, who's like that's like his thing. Mike Musselman, a part of Fletcher, like he's one of like their head, like just techs in general for Fletcher, but like the trace system is like his baby, and he works with. He's the lead engineer, but he works hand in hand with the guy who actually wrote and writes all the code that built that whole system. Like so he's updating it all the time. But then at the U.S. Open, Mike's really cool about. He was actually testing out a whole new like update and like this whole other software basically for next year that they're gonna probably implement. But he was testing it out on my court for the Open, and I was like, dude, just turn it on, because he was doing it like before I would get in, before there were matches, and like I would sit there with him, and he was like explaining a lot of the changes and like how stuff worked, because I would always give him feedback, and I'd be like, yeah, it'd be cool if this could do this, and then like he would go talk to the guy like after work or like during the day, because he's not operating, he's always tinkering with something, because he's an engineer. That's what they do. It just has shit all over his desk and just opens stuff up and is running around and just, yeah, always has his tools on him. But, and like he'll take that stuff. That's why he's awesome, because he'll take that feedback or be like, yeah, this would be cool if like this could do that or this could do that. And he keeps a notebook of all of that feedback that he gets from me or from the other operators. And then he goes and talks to, I forget his name, Wayne. I don't know his last name. So that's all you're getting. I think it's Wayne. And then like this dude, and then Mike will come in the next morning with a thumb drive, because this dude stayed up and wrote code and changed whatever we were talking about. And I'm like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And then they've been like improving this system and improving it. So that, that's just been a cool, like I said, kind of being not necessarily ahead of it. Like I'm not the one driving it or like actually physically doing it, but I have some hand and I can actually see it change and evolve.
Yeah. Having cool. That mindset, again, that being interested and being intrigued by, holy crap, he just did that. He stayed up all night and coded. My engineering company, Triple S, that was in the music side. It was the same thing. People were floored that I wasn't a keyboard player, because it was all synth driven, and all my clients were like big time 1% heavy hitter celebrity keyboard synth players. And they would come in and say, dude, can you make this do this? And then I'd be like, okay. And then I'd hot ride. I have no idea why I'm doing it, but this player is telling me that this is an important feature that would be cool to have.
Right.
So then I would get, okay, and I'd hack it and make it work and hand it off. And he'd be like, oh, this is so awesome. Then somebody else would see that. And that was the constant evolution. And it's interesting because I watch you in that world doing this, because you're on the cutting edge of the next wave of the next level of technology. Yeah. And you as an operator, but you're coming in highly experienced, like those 1% keyboard players at the highest level. You're the keyboard player. And you're talking to the engineer, which was me at that time. Yeah. And those guys, if they had to sit down and operate your gear, they'd crash and burn, even though they know the gear inside and out. Right?
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, because it's a different, they're building yes. I mean, there are definitely, like Mike can operate. Like he has an engineer and can help with that, but not, he's not an operator. He doesn't sell himself at that. If he has to hop in and fill in,
right,
he can't.
Same.
Ollie is the same way. Ollie's more interested on the engineer side and the maintenance of like the MCU, which is all like the back end. I mean, there's a whole other part of all of this too, which is a whole rack room of the actual telecast boxes and how all these feeds get everywhere and all that shit, which I don't even ever want to go in there.
But that's a path. And I've met a lot of people, we all see something, and then all of a sudden, yeah, you might have come in as a audio engineer, and then you get the technology, you get intrigued, and the next thing you
Yeah.
know, you're way away from an operator, but you're in another world.
Yeah. And honestly, it's just the exposure of that, and I mean, and that's the that's like the third part of this, and like the whole Pharaoh City mantra, right? Like we talked about getting in, we talked about how to get all these skills, or at least get us exposed to all these skills, and then that exposure to what you thought, like you just said, getting, you went in to go do this, but then like you see all this other shit that maybe doesn't have to do directly with what you came there for, but then you can see that and be like, oh man, like that's cool. There's like fiber techs on these shows. Usually what I do, like I kind of am the fiber tech, but I like that. I like seeing you know, the DBs and like trying to find where this light has to go and like patching all that stuff and moving actual video around. And then that goes back to the truck and blah, blah, blah. And then you see all this other stuff and you're like, okay, maybe I don't want to do what I really came here for. So then you go talk to whoever those people are. And then that's the getting ahead. And then you kind of, like you said, figuring out whatever that path is. I just happen to know where I never really, before doing like the Fletcher stuff, like I liked building the actual physical jib, right? Like I enjoyed doing that. And I got, it's just, I don't know, it's just whatever and that's like kind of simple, as opposed to like other stuff, but it's like mechanical and it's just, I don't know, I just like building it, like having hands on and actually physically building something, and then taking it not like a step further, but then like between like, the Jitacam, like building that in the air, and like building that whole system, which is insane. And then now doing more complex Fletcher stuff where it's like you show up on a site, here's a box of shit of all these different mounts and rails and all this different stuff, but like there's no plan of, sometimes there are, but like it's just like, okay, we want a camera up there, and then we want 4 more up there, down there, and over there. And it's like Fletcher sends all different mounts because they don't know what it's going to entail, but they're trusting you that you go out, and then it's like, all right, figure it out. So to me, that was a lot of the fun part. Like operating's great. That's the payoff to me.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
Payoff. That's the payoff of all of that. It's like sports. Like you practice all week, you put in all that work and you get everything all fine tuned, and then the payoff is playing the game.
Right.
So to me, that's like kind of when you like almost like calm down a little bit. The 5, or 2 week set days for that Oregon show is like, all right, like I got to figure out how to mount this where it's going to make sense. I got to put it up there and like drill stuff and like put this together and like build all this different shit. And I mean, that is like just as creative as actually operating.
And for some people more.
Yeah. That's honestly, like I kind of realized that how much I actually liked doing that.
Right. And but that's the whole, you said it, and that is one of the critical points. You have to know, you have to be in these environments, but you don't open the door and you're in those environments. You have to evolve into it because you need the backstory. You need to have derivative to where you got to. You can't just walk into a Fletcher situation and not have had the derivative of your, 10 years of tech. And you evolve very quickly. I mean, your 10 is probably equivalent to most people's 20. But that's because you're at a pace where you like to learn quickly and digest quickly. And you can do both sides of this. You understand technical, you understand mechanical. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want to touch on one thing because I was smirking as you were saying it. You and I went to the first Super Bowl together. And again, we were Pharaoh.
Not the first Super Bowl ever.
No, the first Super Bowl. Well, it's actually the second Super Bowl I worked, but it was the first Super Bowl you and I worked together. Pharaoh Productions, hired by the New York Giants, and we went to do this. So the Giants had now gotten used to doing a lot of programming, and we're used to selling a lot of shows. So we took the shows on the road, basically, and we took the jib on the road. We rented a jib from somebody who brand new jib, is great shape, but you had never built a jib up to that point because the jib in the studio was already built.
Right.
I had never built a jib because I don't need to build a jib. So
Yeah, and I hadn't met Chuck at this point or
correct.
anybody. Like I hadn't been doing
So
that.
we had a box of jib parts, and we got to location. We had to build a jib, and I was like, I deferred to, because I've been riding Harleys my whole life, and I come from a family of auto mechanics. So I was like, let's see, does this piece fit to this piece? And then you and I were trying to piece things together and build a jib. And it's like, when you're building a model or a erector or anything, whatever it is, and you're looking at the box going, okay, this is
putting a puzzle together.
Yeah, this is what it's got to look like in the end. I got this piece, that looks like that piece. So put those two, and then you get halfway through and you go, oh crap, you can't do that until you do this. And take it all apart again and put it all. What probably takes you now, what would you say an 18-foot jib takes you to build with one utility guy?
At max 2 hours.
Okay.
Probably an hour.
That probably took you and I 10.
Yeah, a whole day.
We spent the entire day putting this together.
Because first we just laid everything on the ground and just laid everything out.
Right, yeah.
And then if you remember, we didn't have enough weight at the end.
That was a brilliant move on your part.
We didn't have enough weight, so to balance it out.
Because now we got the jib to the point that it's what you knew.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Frank shifted out of that and said, okay, I know this thing. I know how this thing works. And then tell the story about the weight.
Yeah, it's functional and everything as far as the controls and the cameras on there, and we could see everything, but it's not balanced. Like anytime I brought it up, it wanted to go back down because we weren't sent enough actual weights to balance out the length of the arm with the camera on it. And it wasn't like a lot, like we didn't need that much more, but I didn't have any like the little in-between weights, like a 5-pounder, 2.5, anything like that. So I filled up a backpack with waters, like full waters, and put them in there to get it close, like to balance, and then actually was pouring water out of some of the bottles to get it, and I mean it worked perfectly.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, well, a jib is, and I heard you talking, we have a new tech working with us on one of the shows, and Frank was training him, and he was explaining it's a seesaw. So you have weight on this side, and literally weights, like in the gym, plates on the rail on the other side. So you have to get it so that the jib on its own sits in a perfect balance. And then you could move it and do whatever you want. But the jib has to sit in an equilibrium position. So that's what Frank was saying. He was pouring waters out and got it. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting, what we call road case stories, which are just tales about jobs and gigs and things like that. But that's another show all unto itself. So what we just described in this episode is Ferro City. I mean, we built this jointly, communally, collaboratively with people who've lived this life, who are in it, who do look out for the next generation, who have trained. We understand how this works, and we understand that it's a very difficult industry to just drop into from nowhere. It's hard, but you don't need to have a connection. You need to make a connection. And once you make one, it might not be the right one, so you may have to make another and another. But once you make that right connection, then as Frank described, his career blossomed and his connections blossomed, which the opportunities evolved, which his skills evolved. So everything grew from those single connections. And the one other person I want to just mention is Anthony Fusilli from MSG, Anthony worked with me for 100 years as Ferro Productions produced those shows for the Garden. Anthony was instrumental in helping Frank on the administrative side of getting into it, because you do need, it's a union shop, and it is an administrative, and you can't work as a freelancer without being part of that union. And Anthony Fusilli and Dominic, who was runs the union, those guys together were with Rick, were the ones who brought him in, and then the doors open up, and then you can do whatever you want, still as a freelancer.
Yeah.
You know, there's very few staff people in the trades.
And like you said, what you were saying before about like it, you know, of people making those connections and you know, like comparing it to what was happening with me, where it kept blossoming. It was like, don't get it wrong. Like, yeah, I keep making those other connections.
Right.
One leads into the next, and like I'm an integral part of making it blossom. It's not just I just don't just sit back and watch.
Yeah,
it happen.
Great point.
Even at the point that I'm at, I'm constantly still, because the minute you stop doing that, then you're no longer going to be on that cutting edge and ahead of the technology or ahead of whatever's coming next.
Right.
And it'll, you know, eventually get too far away from you. So, I mean, you make an effort to do that. If you want to keep comparing it to blossoming, you have to actually be the one who's watering it to make that happen.
Yes, that's a great point. It was interesting because through my music career, and same into broadcast, it's hard for people to recognize that, oh, you're at a show. Oh, you got to go to the show. Oh, you got to go to a convention. Oh, you're going out to, you know, LA for this, you know, big music convention, or you're going to Chicago for, you know, a NAB convention. It's not vacation because you have to be on. Even at the end of the day, when you're just going out and you're going to have some drinks or go out to eat, you have to be on because you're networking. You're never not networking because you need to continue, as Frank said, you have to keep making connections, and you don't know who that next connection is going to lead you to. A lot of them are dead ends. A lot of them don't go anywhere. And, you know, maybe you've had a bunch of conversations and follow-ups and they just dry up on you. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And you got to kind of read through who those, you know, some people that are just full of shit.
Right.
Also, you know, like,
yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of that out there, you know, and I just know who the ones that to actually stay on and go after, and then vice versa, who to help, you know.
Yeah, that's an important
and actually gives a shit and actually wants to do this. I have this kid that I met down doing those Atlanta gigs, who hits me up like twice a month, just to like see what's up. And I'm like, it's hard for me to help him down there because like he lives in Atlanta, and like he keeps wanting to get in on the Jitticam because he saw that, he didn't know what it was. He saw it down there. He like was messing around operating during not during commercials, during downtimes of that show, which was great. So like I saw an interest, and anytime I was down there, and then he asked for my number, and then was always asking me and how to get to anyone at Jitticam and how to start working with them. And I'm like, dude, like you need to, but he's, you know, it hasn't gotten to the point for him yet where he's gotten to be able to do it just because of the geographical difference at the moment. But, you know, he's just literally texted me the other day.
Yep. That's
just checking in. And I mean, and that's
important because you don't know. I mean, people ask me all the time about hiring. And I said, quite honestly, thanks. I appreciate your name. Yeah, I've seen your work. You're great. I got this. But you got to stay in touch with me because I'll get a phone call for Ferro Productions to go out and do a show. And I literally go, whoever's right at the top of my head. It comes off the top. I'm going to go, okay, I need him. And I'll call him. You're not available. You know anybody else? And it's weird because I probably have a longer list, but I'm asking the last person who said I can't do it for references. And that's how this works. You know, you've got to stay in people's face all the time. So,
yeah.
All right. Great stuff, Frank. Thank you. Appreciate it. You're like a son to me, you know, we have such a good relationship.
You know, I mean, I was going to say, you're kind of like a father figure to me, you know, in a lot of ways, not just in work, you know, but in life.
Okay, cool. And by the way, everybody, you should also know that Frank is now also a big part of the design of Ferro City. So he has gone from being it should do this and it should do this to, hey, I made it do this. Hey, I made it do this. No reason to have those skills other than the fact that he can't stop learning. So thank you for doing that too. All right. right, son. Take care. Peace.
Yeah.